Hello, folks, and welcome back to our Vancouver VGC coverage. We're down to our last couple of matches. This is the second of the top four matches here, and once again, we have some pretty interesting teams. This is our Behzad Muntazir top four match. We saw Behzad in the top eight to quite a bit of success. Behzad is running one of the most exciting teams that we have, mostly because it is a restricted that very rarely gets screen time here in Lunala. It'll pop up here in just a second, I promise. In Lunala, Power Herb, Shadow Shield, a great duo with that Meteor Beam, can dish out some additional damage with Moongeist Beam, can set Trick Room, and takes advantage of Psychic Terrain with Expanding Force, paired with Indeedee Female that you see in the middle right there. Terra Fairy for the Indeedee, Rocky Helmet, Psychic Surge, Follow Me, Alluring Voice is the move of choice here, Trick Room, and Helping Hand. Ogerpon Hearthflame is the additional redirector or Ogerpon or Grass type of choice here, with Ivy Cudgel, Woodhammer, Follow Me, and Spiky Shield. Sometimes we see this Ogerpon with a Focus Energy to get some additional critical hits with the Ivy Cudgel, but not this time around. We also have the pretty prominent duo of Landorus Incarnate and Roaring Moon. We saw this take home San Antonio Regionals and has been quite successful throughout the rest of VGC, as we see here. Terra Poison for that Landorus, the Life Orb Sheer Force interaction is always very powerful. Earth Power, Sludge Bomb, Sandstorm Storm, and Protect. Does great works into things like Miraidon, especially the Terra Fairy version. Roaring Moon can set Tailwind with that booster energy, boosting its speed most of the time. You have to have some specific training for that, but that's always what we see. Well, not always, but most of the time. It is that Terra flying to take advantage of Acrobatics, get some additional damage off, knock off Tailwind, Protect, rounds things out. And then we have Terra Stellar Urshifu to deal some additional damage to terrestrialized Pokemon. Focus Sash, Surging Strikes, Close Combat, Taunt, and Detect. We see that Taunt here still being quite successful. We've seen it was kind of taken over a good bit before, but we see the Taunt here is kind of about 50-50 on a lot of Urshifus. Not quite as prevalent as it has been, but there have been a ton of different Urshifu sets, and Terra Stellar with this taunt has just been one of the new ones here. One of the big duos that we see from Behzad is the Lunala and Indeedee. We saw that absolutely dominate in his top 8 match. Just those two Pokemon alone, with the combination of Follow Me, Helping Hand, and Trick Room, do a lot of work in supporting the Lunala with the Expanding Force and Psychic Surge. Another really powerful duo is just leading Landorus Incarnate in Roaring Moon. You don't have to go for that Trick Room mode. You can still dish out a ton of damage both on the special and physical sides. Setting up Tailwind, Acrobatics, Knockoff, it's all really good options for Roaring Moon in basically every scenario. And it's really hard to deal with a team that has these multiple modes, Trick Room and Tailwind. You have to be able to prep for both. A lot of teams will have Pokemon that they bring. You know, if they are a hard Trick Room team, they'll have a faster one that they can use to kind of outpace opposing teams. Or if they're a faster team, they'll have a slower mon to try to function in Trick Room here. And that's kind of exactly what we see. It's a relatively standard Miraidon team. We've seen a lot of standard Miraidon teams have a lot of success here. And it's that Terra Fairy choice specs with the Dazzling Gleam, Volt Switch, Electro Drift, and Draco Meteor. Fergraph with the Psychic Seed, notably. I don't know if that is a team sheet error or if this is actually to kind of interact with Indeedees, which are honestly one of the more popular terrain setters over Rillaboom, at least more successful than we've seen in the top 8. Psychic, Foul Play, Helping Hand, and Trick Room on this Fergraph with the Terra Water. Urshifu Rapid Strike is also Terra Stellar, but instead of Detect and Taunt, it actually has Aqua Jet and Protect. Protect and Detect is kind of here or there, although Protect is technically a little bit more open to Imprison. Incineroar here is Terra Dragon, which is an incredible Terra type, quite frankly. It, I guess, removes ground and rock weaknesses specifically, and resists water. Very interesting. It is Assault Vest with Flare Blitz, Knock Off, U-Turn, and Fake Out. Whimsicott here, very standard for a Miraidon team. Terra Dark with the Covert Cloak, Prankster, Moonblast, Encore, Tailwind, and a Light Screen as your main speed control. And then Ursaluna is the big slow Pokemon here. A lot of times you see the Ursaluna Blood Moon, but this is just a standard Ursaluna. Terra Poison with the Flame Orb and Guts. Takes a second to get its full damage up, but it feels really good. Facade, Headlong Rush, Protect. There was one more move there that I didn't see. But a lot of times, and we see this in Chase's team building here, a lot of times we have seen people lean more towards having their one restricted as their primary special attacker or physical attacker, and really their only special or physical attacker, and the rest of their team is built around getting speed control, supporting that restricted Pokemon, and then also rounding it out with 2 or 3 really strong Pokemon that are the opposite stat attack. Physical attackers often paired with things like Miraidon, special attackers often paired with things like Calyrex Ice Rider. So seeing this here with Chase Rumpca, a lot of times it's the Blood Moon Ursaluna that's paired with the Miraidon. A lot of times people just consider that to be stronger, but in this case, Chase Rumpca is kind of following that trend of physical attackers getting paired with your special attacking restricted. And Chase here decides to lead with Incineroar and that Miraidon to try to get max advantage out of it, but Behzad once again is leading with just the very tried and true combo that we have seen on stream so far from him of Indeedee plus Lunala. So This is a little tough here for Chase. You obviously cannot fake out here. Intimidate doesn't really do much. Miraidon is going to be the fastest thing on the field. You do have to worry about potentially follow me here from the Indeedee, which could do a lot of work. Lunala has the option to go for Meteor Beam, which would be super effective into the Incineroar. I guess you could Terra if you wanted to. That feels early, and I don't know if you necessarily want to use your Terra on Incineroar. We do see the Terastallization coming out for Chase, so it could be the Miraidon going for the Terra Fairy and Dazzling Gleam, but no, it is going to be that Incineroar here going for that Terra Dragon. So it is not going to be weak to a potential Meteor Beam coming out of this Lunala, which is absolutely incredible stuff. If you are Chase, we do even see the Helping Hand coming out for the Lunala here. If this is a Dazzling Gleam, this is going to be really, or I'm not, an Expanding Force. This is going to hurt a lot, but it is not. We actually see the Volt Switch coming through for the Miraidon, so it's going to get out of dodge here. It can't afford to Terrastal, or it's not going to be able to Terrastalize for the rest of the game, which might be pretty big. We do see the Farigiraf come out now. A little bit more of a supportive Pokemon, although, there's not really any priority moves that Behzad is going to be using, and Lunala is going to be going for that Meteor Beam. I imagine that's going to be going into the Incin. That's a pretty clear shot if you are Behzad. I'm interested to see if this still KOs or not with the Helping Hand. Takes Incineroar down to about a third of its HP, in between a third and a quarter, but it still survives, and it gets a knockoff off into that Lunala, taking it down pretty cleanly. Sacrificing a lot of Incineroar's health bar for that Lunala is pretty big. Super interested to see what comes in next here for Behzad. So it is going to be this Landorus, actually. So the Lunala going down, it's rough because obviously having the Expanding Force would feel really nice, but you still have plenty of damage in the back for Behzad. So Chase losing a good amount of HP on that Incineroar, but the Terra Dragon keeping it up, that could be pretty pivotal going into the rest of the game. Now, one thing to note for Chase here, you do have the Miraidon in the back, and the Indeedee for Behzad was able to overwrite the terrain into that Psychic terrain. That's one of the really big advantages of Indeedee, is that it's quite frankly slower than Miraidon. And we see Behzad here, the Miraidon is off the field, and so the Indeedee swaps off the field as well. So as soon as Chase brings that Miraidon back out, I imagine we'll see the same for Behzad here. What Chase has the opportunity to do, though, we see the Sandsear Storm come out, and Incineroar goes down. Farigiraf goes down pretty low as well. For Chase, a big priority is going to be getting one of Behzad's Pokemon KO'd. Just one of them. If Chase is able to do that, that will force Behzad to bring the Indeedee in before Miraidon comes in. As long as Chase can get one KO before one of his own Pokemon goes down, which is a lot easier said than done, quite frankly, especially with this Ogerpon on the field now. It's going to have redirection support, and Ursaluna is what comes out for Chase. It's not going to have the maximum damage output this turn, and I think this should mean that this Ursaluna is going to have to at least protect on this turn to try to get Guts up. Farigiraf doesn't have Protect, I believe, for Chase, so it's going to have to go for a foul play here. It goes into the Ogerpon. It does some damage, but Earth Power will just take this Farigiraf down, and now Chase is in the exact position that Behzad was trying to avoid, and Behzad successfully avoided, which is that your Terrain Setter is coming in, and it's coming in before the opposing Terrain Setter, meaning you're going to lose out on your Terrain boost as soon as Indeedee comes out onto the field. You do have Trick Room up, which feels pretty good. You do have Guts activated, which is pretty solid for that Ursaluna, but having to deal with essentially Ursaluna being the only really functional Pokemon here is really hard for Chase. It's going to be able to take a lot of KOs and do a lot of damage, obviously, but there's only so many turns of Trick Room, and as soon as that Landorus is faster than the Ursaluna, which I think it'll be able to do, then it's just going to be GG. Right now, Ogerpon can go for a potential Follow Me, or at the same time, Behzad can just try to outlast his Trick Room. Both Pokemon have Protect here. You can install a turn of Trick Room, which it feels really nice if you're Behzad. But then you have Ogerpon and Indeedee with which both have Redirection, which is going to cause major problems for Chase. He's not going to be able to target down this Landorus unless potentially Miraidon survives and is able to go for a Draco Meteor into that slot and it hits, or maybe a Dazzling Gleam hits both Pokemon. But right now, those two redirectors that are going to stay on the field, that gives Landorus 2 free turns here, essentially. It should target down this Miraidon on the next turn. A single Earth Power should take Miraidon down, and then Ursaluna is also going to have to be dealing with taking Flame Orb damage, with taking Burn damage, which very well might be the thing that ends up costing it. It's relatively bulky. It might even be specially bulky. We don't know the exact stats. A lot of times, though, these Ursalunas are going to be max HP, max attack stat, but there could be a little bit of defensive investment, and Ursaluna very well could potentially survive an Earth Power. But after multiple turns of burn, potentially having to take Rocky Helmet recoil from Indeedee, that could absolutely do it. We see the Facade go into the Ogerpon and take it down after a Follow Me. Earth Power goes into the Miraidon. It doesn't get a chance to get an attack off, and Miraidon goes down really cleanly. So there's only a couple turns of Trick Room left here. I think Behzad can continue to stall that out as long as needed. Indeedee's going to be able to come in here. Doesn't have Protect. So if you are Behzad, you can go for the Follow Me and Earth Power here. That almost certainly should take down the Ursaluna, and even if it doesn't, you have the ability to go for Protect, and I think that should stall out Trick Room. We can't see exactly how many turns are left, but I think it's just either it's 1 or 2 at the most, 2 at the absolute most. And especially if this is the last turn, and you can just go for Follow Me, you go for Earth Power on the Landorus, and that should be the rest of this game. Indeedee goes for that Follow Me. We're going to see the Facade here from the Ursaluna, or I imagine it's going to be the Facade. Yes, it's going to be the Facade. That simply is Ursaluna's strongest attack here. It takes down the Indeedee, but it's going to take Rocky Helmet damage. It's going to take burn damage at the end of this turn, and it is going to be taking an Earth Power here. This is going to be so much for this Ursaluna to deal with. Landorus is so incredibly strong here. This might just take it out outright, and it does. Game number 1 going over to Behzad Muntazir. If you are Chase, man, that's a hard game to parse. For Rigorath, setting Trick Room, getting Ursaluna into that spot feels pretty good, but it just clearly wasn't enough. Taking Lunala down is really good as well, right? That feels really solid. But when you lose Incineroar immediately after that, and then your Miraidon just essentially doesn't get a chance to do anything because of your own Trick Room, that's a really hard sell. You don't have another, you have 2 really high damage, 3 really high damage Pokemon here. Miraidon, Ursaluna, and Urshifu. I don't know that you necessarily want to bring Urshifu to this match. It does a lot of work, but it doesn't like being in Psychic Terrain, and it really does not want to have to deal with the Lunala with Expanding Force. It just doesn't. Surging Strikes doesn't mind going up against Shadow Shield necessarily, but it's a really hard call. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Chase opt for going with Whimsicott, but then you obviously have to potentially deal with Behzad setting up Trick Room. This is one of those things that's really, really difficult that we were talking about before that makes it hard to play against these teams. You don't know what speed control they are going to set, and if you come prepared to fight in Trick Room, a lot of times that can leave you stranded when your opponent has the skill, the capabilities to deal with that, the tools to deal with that without even worrying about speed control of their own. So going into game number 2 here, I'm interested to see how Chase can adapt. For Behzad, I mean, you might as well go with the same thing, right? It worked before, and it looks like it's going to work again. Both players are leading the exact same thing here, but now we have the very interesting call of, does this Incineroar terrestrialize? If it does, Helping Hand Expanding Force does crazy numbers, or even potentially Follow Me Expanding Force does crazy work. We could also immediately see that Meteor Beam into the Incineroar again, into either of these slots, quite frankly. We know that Incineroar doesn't go down to a Helping Hand Meteor Beam. You might want to try getting damage onto the Miraidon for it. You know it's going to Volt Switch, and you saw the Farigiraf come in. If you are Behzad, taking that down maybe is a bit more of a priority so that Chase just can't set up Trick Room if Ursaluna is indeed what is in the back. So now if you're Chase, you have the really hard decision of, okay, the Dragon Terrestrialization worked, quite frankly, felt like it worked pretty well game number 1. It didn't ultimately lead to a success, but it felt pretty good. Do you go for that again? We see the Terrestrialization coming out here from Chase. Looks like that just might be the move here. And indeed it is. Incineroar goes for that Terra Dragon, opens it up to taking potential Expanding Force damage, but as before, we saw that Volt Switch plus Knockoff does take down this Lunala, but so far we are seeing an exact repeat of game number 1. Miraidon gets to go for that Volt Switch. Shadow Shield is broken, and Miraidon is going back towards Chase. Now, do we see the same Pokemon come out for Chase is a pretty big question here. If you are Chase, maybe you're making the call, okay, does Lunala go for that Meteor Beam into Incineroar again? And if so, do I feel safe maybe going into Ursaluna now? And that is exactly what we see. Ursaluna makes its appearance on the field. It'll be able to get Guts activated this turn, but where is this Meteor Beam going? If it's going into Incineroar, I feel like this is a really good play. At the same time, Behzad could have made the call just to go ahead and take an attack into this Miraidon slot, especially if the Volt Switch, if you're anticipating this Volt Switch again, and that's exactly what happens. Ursaluna does resist it, but that is half of Ursaluna's HP taken down. So Lunala goes down. Chase has now made a different trade, half of Ursaluna's HP plus Guts activated for taking the Lunala down. Now, You have Guts activated, but you know that this Lunala does not take an Earth Power from Landorus. You cannot worry about Fake Out here, or you cannot use Fake Out here. Behzad does not have to worry about Fake Out here. Sanctuary Storm or Earth Power, both are going to do quite a lot of work. Sanctuary Storm does have the opportunity to miss. I think if you're Chase, you maybe have to... Oh, this is really, really hard. If you're Chase, potentially having to deal with this Landorus is not easy. Behzad, once again, can just follow the protocol of switching the Indeedee out. You don't necessarily have to worry about this Ursaluna doing too much to you if you are Behzad, because again, if Sanctuary Storm hits, I think that just takes it out. Incineroar is at full HP, and it's not weak to a Sanctuary Storm. I think it might be able to survive it. A potential knockoff here could do a lot of work. I would greatly reduce a lot of Sheer Force's damage. And we see the Protect coming out of the Landorus. No damage coming through here in that slot. We don't see any switches out of Chase either. The Protect coming through from the Ursaluna is going to take another chip of damage from Guts. What is this Incineroar doing? The U-turn is the call here. It goes into Ogerpon. That feels pretty good. I think this might be a bit of a best case scenario if you are Chase. I think the only thing would be if you made an incredible call that the Landorus wasn't going to attack and you went for the Facade into the Ogerpon, but we see the Miraidon come back out. Now Chase not revealing that fourth Pokemon yet. So Electric Terrain is back on the field here. Technically priority moves can be used, but once again, there is no Trick Room up. Landorus does have to worry about potential Draco Meteor here from the Miraidon. Again, this comes to a question of how fast is the Miraidon as opposed to the Landorus. The thing that Miraidon also has to worry about though is a Follow Me from the Ogerpon, and that is exactly what we see. We know this Ursaluna is going to be slower here. So does Draco Meteor take out the Ogerpon, and then can Ursaluna get an attack off, get a Facade off into this Landorus? We see Miraidon special attack, Harshly Fall. It's going to go down here. Does a Sanctuary Storm KO both of these Pokemon in this range, and does it hit both? Landorus misses the Miraidon, but it does hit the Ursaluna, and it does take it down. So Landorus gets to stay on the battlefield for another turn. We do know that the Miraidon is faster, but that Draco Meteor is not going to hit nearly as hard, and the Indeedee can still go for Follow Me. We haven't seen a Terastallization out of Behzad either. That could be pretty big going into the remainder of this game. We know that there's an Incineroar in the back, but Terrain is getting overwritten once again. Now, this is a situation that we brought up in game number 1. Behzad can no longer overwrite the Terrain anymore. It is Psychic Terrain now, but there's a world where Chase can switch out the Miraidon, bring in Pokemon number 3, bring the Miraidon back in, and then it has that Hadron Engine boost for the rest of the game. But that said, that's a lot easier said than done. Landorus getting off free attacks right now does not feel good. Incineroar's at full HP. I doubt that Sanctuary Storm is going to be able to take that down. We could potentially see I believe it's Terra Fairy for this Indeedee, which Follow Me right now, drawing in a Draco Meteor from the Miraidon, feels really good if that is the case. If it's not, even if it's not a Terra Fairy, potentially could still feel pretty good. But even then, a Terra Fairy Follow Me taking a knockoff and a Draco Meteor, I mean, I feel like that might just win you the game if you are Behzad. I guess if you are Behzad, the thing you potentially have to worry about is Urshifu Rapid Strike in the back. Like, that is the main threat you have to worry about if you were Landorus, but I don't think that Terra Poison Landorus survives a triple Surging Strikes anyways, and it is that Farigiraf that's in the back for Chase. Chase trying to reset the Electric Terrain here. I don't think Farigiraf does anything to help you win the game here. And if you are Chase, you know that this Indeedee has the Terra Fairy. A Flare Blitz here honestly might be your best course of action, trying to get this Indeedee KO'd as fast as possible. I don't even know if a Flare Blitz would take it down though. That's the question. So Follow Me comes through from the Indeedee. Knockoff could obviously Knockoff could take away the Rocky Helmet. We see this Answer Your Storm. How much damage is it going to do? It takes Farigiraf down to half. This Farigiraf is not surviving the rest of the game here. Flare Blitz from the Incineroar here. My guess it would have been Flare Blitz or U-turn, and Indeedee takes that incredibly well. Incineroar is hurt by the Rocky Helmet. This is going to be another Answer Your Storm that gets to go off though from this Landorus. And neither of these Pokemon on Chase's side of the field can do anything about it. That's going to effectively leave Miraidon as the last thing that's going to be able to come out here. I mean, for Chase, you can't go for Draco Meteor for the Miraidon in the back. You can't go for Dazzling Gleam. I mean, I guess you could. You could go for Dazzling Gleam. But does that do enough? I don't know if that's going to do enough to the Landorus. And so the question is, does Dazzling Gleam do enough? I think that is what you have to do if you are Chase. You go for Dazzling Gleam in the back. Sanctuary Storm comes through. We knew that was going to happen. And we saw, I think Behzad does have a win condition here, which is just go for Trick Room. You know your Landorus is slower than the Miraidon, and all it needs is to get one attack off. Indeed, he didn't need to go for Follow Me here. Landorus was the fastest thing on the field. It was going to take out both of these Pokemon no matter what. And we did indeed see that Trick Room. I saw Behzad hovering over it, and I just realized the win condition. So Chase Rumpca now. There is no way for this Miraidon to win the rest of the game. It's going to be incredibly strong. A Dazzling Gleam would maybe even be able to take out both of these Pokemon here, but last minute Trick Room from Behzad Muntazir here means that this Landorus is going to be technically the second thing moving, with Indeedee being the first. I think technically if you want to play it to the max odds, you click follow me just in case maybe, but we do see, or I'm sorry, you click helping hand just to make sure, but I think this Earth Power would have done it one way or another. The Miraidon goes down, and in 2 games, Behzad Muntazir takes home what am I trying to say? Makes it to the finals. Doesn't take home anything yet. A guaranteed top 2 finish is what he takes home, but still has one more match to play. So that was a very exciting game. Getting to see that Indeedee just seems so strong. Like, Behzad Muntazir is making Indeedee seem like one of the best Pokemon in the game right now, which is quite frankly surprising to say. But we'll be looking at the finals next, which features 2 awesome teams that I'm super excited to talk about. Might need to give my voice a little bit of a rest though. But until next time, be safe, be smart, make wise decisions, and farewell.